a 29-year-old female officer vanished during a routine patrol in 1983, leaving no trace. But 17 years later, a salvage worker crushing an old car uncovers something that makes investigators' blood run cold. Subscribe to the channel, leave your like and comment where in the world you are watching from, because now I'm going to tell how it all happened. This is not a story about distant wars or political intrigue. What happened in the lush valleys beneath the Cascade Mountains during the spring and summer of 1974 struck closer to ordinary life, turning routine walks to libraries and lakes into moments of quiet peril. The first signal of trouble appeared on the evening of the 4th of January, when 21-year-old Linda Ann Healy left her shared house near the University District in Seattle to study and never returned. Roommates noticed her bed untouched at sunrise the next morning. Her alarm clock buzzed into the emptiness, and the calm that usually covered the campus, like morning mist, began to thin. Seattle police opened a missing person report on the 6th of January, noting Linda's long chestnut hair, middle part, and soft-spoken manner. Officers searched alleys, questioned classmates, and scanned Lake Union's edges without finding a single thread of her clothing. Flyers soon lined telephone poles from Roosevelt Way to Capitol Hill, but within days they faded under winter rain. On the 18th of February, the pattern deepened. Brenda Ball, a 22-year-old student who enjoyed live music, left the Flame Tavern in Burien just past midnight and disappeared somewhere between the parking lot and her dormitory 5 miles north. Friends recalled seeing her talk with a courteous man who wore a sling, as though nursing an injured arm. 2 vanishings in 6 weeks felt like coincidence, until investigators placed the case files side by side. Similar height, similar hair, similar trusting nature. Pressure grew quietly. Parents installed new locks, hardware stores sold out of window latches, and campus security offered whistle training sessions at noon on Wednesdays. Yet spring brought no answers. Instead, it brought sunshine and more shadows. On the 6th of June, college senior Janice Ott left a crowded beach at Lake Sammamish State Park around lunchtime to fetch her bicycle lock, and was not seen again. Less than 4 hours later, Denise Naslund, 19, left a picnic table at the same park to locate a restroom. She too vanished between the cliffs of Green Forest and the busy lake shore, where hundreds relaxed under beach umbrellas. Witnesses later described a man with a cast asking both women for help loading a small sailboat onto a tan Volkswagen. By the second week of July, detectives from King County met daily at a temporary command center downtown. Large maps covered one wall, red pushpins marking each last known location. A single word, Ted, sat on an index card beneath the map, the only shared detail volunteers could offer. Search parties combed wooded trails at dawn, often finding nothing more than a torn purse strap or faint drag marks in soft soil. Reporters adopted the phrase, "vanishing in the mountains," to headline the mystery, and readers followed every terse update. As summer advanced, the universities prepared fall schedules, yet a silent hunter walked among crowded parks and coffee shops, unseen but increasingly confident. In the cool evenings of the Pacific Northwest, a question hung in the air heavier than the cedar scent. Who was choosing these young women, and where would he appear next? Anxious weeks passed while the cedar-scented question lingered. By the middle of August of 1974, county records showed 7 young women unaccounted for in western Washington and neighboring Oregon. Patrol cars rolled through campus neighborhoods after twilight, their roof lights dark, yet their engines humming, watchful for the tan Volkswagen said to cruise parking lots. Storefronts along University Way displayed twin posters. One carried faces of the missing, the other a composite sketch of a neat young man whose first name, witnesses insisted, was Ted. Detectives in King County began holding joint briefings with officers from Multnomah County and Lane County, believing the Cascade Range did not stop a traveling predator. Thick binders held timelines for each disappearance, and similarities kept stacking up. Every victim had long brown hair, parted straight down the center, and each was last seen near a public place during daylight. The pattern felt deliberate, like evenly spaced footprints on a forest path. On Monday, the 2nd of September, police divers searched the waters off Lake Sammamish again, hoping lower summer levels might reveal hidden evidence. They surfaced with only a single woman's sandal and a rusted padlock. That same week, local newspapers quoted criminologists who warned that organized offenders often shift territory when pressure mounts. The warning proved accurate. While Washington residents tightened routines, a parallel set of reports emerged farther south. On the 12th of September, Oregon State Police recorded the disappearance of 19-year-old Susan Curtis near the campus of Oregon State University in Corvallis. 2 days later, a cashier in Eugene mentioned a polite customer whose arm rested inside a sling while he purchased medical tape and rope. Investigators compared receipts and noted the man's sign name, TC, letters that matched the first and middle initials on Washington's bulletin board. Communication technology then was limited to telephone calls and teletype pages. Even so, detectives formed an informal network, passing vehicle plate numbers and witness sketches across 3 states. They agreed to watch for a light-colored Volkswagen Beetle registered in multiple regions under different owners. Officers in Olympia, Portland, and Boise stopped nearly 200 Beetles within 4 weeks, logging driver names and photographing arm casts when found. Each encounter raised public hope, yet none produced a full match. In late October, the Federal Bureau of Investigation assigned analyst Robert Ressler to compile behavioral data from the scattered files. He observed that the suspect appeared disciplined, likely kept trophies, and followed regional news reports to measure investigative progress. Ressler's summary warned that the offender might escalate if he sensed capture growing closer. That escalation arrived abruptly in Utah. On the evening of the 8th of November, 19-year-old Carol Duranch left the Fashion Place Mall in Murray and entered what she believed was an unmarked police vehicle. Minutes later, she escaped from the car, wrists bruised by a metal cuff, and flagged down motorists for help. Carol's detailed statement, light upholstery, a crowbar below the passenger seat, the name Ted, became the first direct description from a living witness. Within 72 hours, Utah Highway Patrol distributed statewide bulletins linking Carol's account to the Pacific Northwest disappearances. King County detectives flew to Salt Lake City carrying aerial maps and hair samples found near Taylor Mountain weeks earlier. For the first time, agencies saw their separate puzzles merge into one larger portrait: a mobile, educated offender, comfortable in college towns, hunting amid normal crowds. The quiet fear that began beside Seattle's lakeside lawns now stretched across the entire western corridor, and winter patrol rotations expanded accordingly. Snow rimmed the Wasatch Mountains when patrol schedules in Utah shifted from routine traffic duty to vigilant watch for the wandering Volkswagen. On Saturday, the 16th of August of 1975, just before midnight, Highway Patrolman Robert Hayward noticed a tan Beetle rolling past a stoplight in Granger without dimming its high beams. The driver's calm wave did little to ease the officer's caution, sharpened by months of circular teletype alerts describing a courteous stranger linked to vanished students from Washington to Colorado. Hayward's inspection revealed items seldom found together in any law-abiding vehicle: one ski mask, a coil of rope, a trash bag neatly folded, a pair of handcuffs, and a slender steel rod filed to a sharp point. The man behind the wheel offered a polite explanation for every object, stating he was Theodore Robert Bundy, age 28, a University of Utah law student returning from a late movie. The officer, uneasy, recorded the inventory and escorted Bundy to Salt Lake County Jail on suspicion of burglary tools, the only immediate statute that fit. While Bundy posted modest bail the following morning, detectives began cross-checking his background. A driver's license issued in Washington matched witness descriptions down to the straight part in his dark hair. His Seattle address lay fewer than 3 miles from the boarding house once shared by Linda Ann Healy. Within 48 hours, King County investigators flew to Utah, carrying manila envelopes thick with missing person reports. The most significant breakthrough arrived on Wednesday, the 3rd of September, when survivor Carol Duranch viewed a photographic array inside Murray Police Headquarters. Without hesitation, she selected Bundy's image, noting the same sharp jawline and soft voice that had coaxed her into a near-fatal ride the year before. A formal lineup 2 days later confirmed her choice. Prosecutors filed a kidnapping charge, setting trial for February of the coming year. Media interest surged. Evening newscasts showed Bundy in pressed slacks, politely thanking deputies as he entered courtrooms. Commentators contrasted his groomed appearance with the grim case details, suggesting the state might be overreaching. Friends from university circles described a volunteer crisis hotline worker who quoted Shakespeare and discussed environmental laws. Yet detectives, sifting through Bundy's Salt Lake City apartment, found Polaroid shots of ski areas, gas station receipts mapping routes to Oregon and Idaho, and strands of long brown hair stuck to adhesive tape inside a desk drawer. Autumn brought laboratory confirmations. Fibers from Bundy's car matched clothing threads recovered near Taylor Mountain in Washington. Even so, the evidence remained circumstantial, built from patterns rather than direct physical linkage. Prosecutors worried that a single skillful argument could unravel months of cooperative investigation. Bundy, granted access to the courthouse library, spent lunch hours studying precedent on search warrants and eyewitness reliability, preparing to represent himself. His trial began on Monday, the 23rd of February of 1976, in Salt Lake City's 3rd District Court. After 4 days of testimony, jurors deliberated only 6 hours before returning a guilty verdict on the kidnapping charge. Judge Stewart ordered 1 to 15 years at Utah State Prison, pending psychiatric evaluation. Public relief proved short-lived. Within weeks of his confinement, detectives from Colorado arrived with fresh warrants tied to skeletal remains discovered near a snowy mountain trail. Bundy, now incarcerated yet still confident, faced transportation orders to Aspen for a preliminary hearing. The legal labyrinth had widened, and the question shifted from whether he was involved to how far his travels, charm, and planning had already reached. Transfer orders moved quickly through spring calendars. On Wednesday, the 6th of June of 1977, Colorado deputies collected Theodore Bundy from Utah State Prison and drove him across mountain passes to the Pitkin County Courthouse in Aspen. There, he would face a preliminary hearing for the slaying of Corinne Campbell, a 23-year-old nurse whose remains had been located along Snowmass Creek 2 winters earlier. Because the courthouse lacked a high-security holding area, guards lodged Bundy in the small county jail across the street and, during hearing recesses, permitted him to study case material unsupervised inside the second-floor law library. For 6 days, Bundy observed the building's rhythms, when deputies refilled coffee, how long clerks chatted by the copier, and which windows remained unlocked for fresh mountain air. At 10:45 in the morning on Thursday, the 7th of June, he seized the gap. Guards stepped into the hallway. Bundy opened a tall window, dropped onto a nearby garden bed, and limped towards Smuggler Mountain Trail, spraining his ankle on impact yet refusing to slow. The escape triggered an immediate search grid. Aspen police, sheriff's volunteers, and U.S. Forest Service rangers combed wooded slopes with tracker dogs and rented helicopters. Nights dipped below freezing, but Bundy, drawing on camping skills learned as a Boy Scout decades earlier in Tacoma, scavenged food from vacant cabins and changed into clothing he found on a laundry line. After 6 days on sparse rations, exhaustion set in. On Tuesday, the 13th of June, deputies spotted a thin, bearded man driving a stolen blue Cadillac along Main Street. A brief foot chase ended behind a gasoline station, where Bundy, now underweight and staggering, surrendered without further struggle. Court officials doubled security. They welded window bars, restricted library access, and transferred Bundy to the larger Glenwood Springs facility 60 miles west. Yet his focus shifted not to defense strategy, but opportunity. He began skipping meals, claiming stomach issues, though guards noticed him jogging in place after lights out. By early December, he weighed nearly 15 pounds less, just enough to squeeze through tight spaces. Using a hacksaw blade hidden in legal paperwork, Bundy widened a ceiling light fixture inside his cell. On the evening of Friday, the 30th of December, while fellow inmates watched a televised movie, he hoisted himself through the opening and crawled along an attic corridor into an empty jailer's apartment above. Civilian clothes left in a closet, dark turtleneck, tweed trousers, completed the disguise. He strolled out the front door at exactly 9:30, leaving a pile of law books arranged under blankets to mimic a sleeping body. Staff discovered the ruse close to noon the next day, nearly 15 hours too late. By then, Bundy had boarded a late-night bus to Denver, then an early flight to Chicago, purchased with cash from stolen checks. Over the next week, he zigzagged east and south on rail lines, studying newspaper headlines about his own getaway. Authorities alerted state patrols from Michigan to Mississippi, but sightings arrived faster than confirmations. Each lead drained manpower, while Bundy, using the alias Christopher Hagan, settled temporarily in a Tallahassee boarding house on Wednesday, the 4th of January of 1978. He was thinner, restless, and running out of money, yet convinced that distance and new surroundings would mask the trail left in those snowy Colorado hills. January air in northern Florida felt mild compared with the mountain chill Bundy had fled. Renting a small room at a boarding house just off College Avenue under the alias Christopher Hagan, he blended among the winter-term crowd at Florida State University. By day, he roamed the campus, studying bulletin boards for schedules and unlocked doors. At night, he drifted through local taverns, using stolen credit cards to keep himself fed. Thin and anxious, he nonetheless projected the same practiced composure that had carried him across half the country. During the early minutes of Sunday, the 15th of January of 1978, a back door at the Chi Omega sorority house refused to latch after a Saturday party. Shortly after 2 a.m., Bundy slipped through the gap. Within less than half an hour, he attacked 4 students in their beds. 2 suffered fatal injuries, 2 more survived, but carried lasting scars. He then walked 3 blocks and assaulted another resident in a basement apartment. Investigators later measured the passage of only 8 minutes between the sorority exit and the second scene, an interval that highlighted both urgency and recklessness. Tallahassee police formed a task force before daylight. Crime scene technicians noted a single bite mark on one victim's shoulder, a critical clue preserved through plaster casting. They also collected fiber threads consistent with a dark ski cap and fragments of paint commonly used on older Volkswagens. Campus administrators responded by installing additional locks, organizing volunteer escorts, and urging students to travel in pairs after sunset. Local media framed the events as an invasion of safe collegiate life, echoing headlines once printed in Seattle. Bundy, meanwhile, remained in Tallahassee, watching the investigation unfold through television reports in campus lounges. On Tuesday, the 24th of January, he stole a white van, drove east to Jacksonville, and abandoned it after scraping university decals from the doors. 2 days later, he appeared 200 miles west in the small town of Lake City. There, on the morning of Friday, the 27th, 12-year-old Kimberly Leach left her junior high homeroom to retrieve a forgotten purse. She never reached the locker. Witnesses remembered a tall man guiding a young girl toward an orange Volkswagen parked beside the athletic field. State and county agencies widened their alert network, distributing Bundy's Utah mugshot and vehicle descriptions to convenience stores, truck stops, and toll booth operators. Troopers set up random checkpoints along Interstate 10, but sightings remained scattered. Bundy cycled through stolen cars quickly, trading license plates at rest areas and sleeping in roadside parks. Each new theft left a trail of gas receipts and abandoned shells that analysts later plotted like breadcrumbs across the panhandle. By the second week of February, his resources thinned. He pawned a stolen television in Tallahassee for $27 and used the cash to buy fuel, peanut butter, and canned beans. Weariness showed in his driving. He ignored minor traffic laws and ventured out during daylight, risks he once avoided. On Wednesday, The 15th of February, shortly before 2 a.m., Swing Officer David Lee of the Pensacola Police Department noticed a suspicious orange Beetle cruising near an alley behind Palafox Street. The officer ran the plates, found a mismatch, and initiated a stop. A brief struggle followed, ending with the handcuffing of the gaunt driver who muttered, "I wish you had finished me." Fingerprint confirmation arrived minutes later. Ted Bundy, twice escaped and now captured in Florida, sat in a holding cell as dawn light washed over the Gulf Coast. The booking process in Pensacola started before sunrise on Thursday, the 16th of February of 1978. Technicians rolled dark ink over Bundy's fingertips and pressed each ridge onto cards already labeled Fugitive Escapee. Minutes later, a teletype from the Federal Bureau of Investigation confirmed the match against Prince held since his Utah conviction. Florida officials now controlled a prisoner wanted in 4 separate states. To prevent a third breakout, jailers placed Bundy in a single cell under constant video watch and ordered guards to log his position every quarter hour. Evidence accumulated quickly. Search teams examined the stolen orange Beetle where Officer Lee had made the arrest. Under the driver's seat, they found 3 hair strands later matched by microscopy to the Chi Omega victims. In the glove compartment lay credit card slips signed Chris Hagen from gas stations near Lake City on the day Kimberly Leach vanished. Crime lab analysts also noted mud from Suwannee County farm roads caked on the wheel wells, placing the vehicle near the pig shed where Kimberly's body would be discovered weeks later. On Monday, the 20th of February, State Attorney Jack Tanner announced first-degree charges for the Tallahassee sorority attacks and for Kimberly's abduction. No bond hearing took place. The judge declared Bundy an extraordinary flight risk. Reporters clustered outside the courthouse, broadcasting live updates through the lunch hour. Bundy, shackled yet calm, managed small waves toward cameras, a familiar routine from earlier court appearances out west. Inside the jail, he requested access to law libraries, citing his right to assist in his own defense. Wardens, remembering Colorado, denied private study and instead delivered selected casebooks to his cell under supervision. Bundy spent long evenings drafting motions on yellow legal pads, challenging search warrants and lineup procedures. Prosecutors countered with a growing list of physical exhibits, plaster casts of the bite mark, fabric fibers, shoe impressions, and photographs of tool marks on each broken door latch. Forensic dentist Dr. Richard Souveron prepared meticulous overlays showing that the alignment of Bundy's upper incisors matched the Chi Omega bite with near-perfect congruence, a rarity among dental patterns. By mid-March, public interest had reached national scale. Network news anchors aired side-by-side images. The smiling law student in sweater vests and the shackled inmate in County Orange. Letters poured into the jail, some condemning, others professing admiration. Psychologists later noted this mix of fear and fascination as a hallmark of high-profile stranger crime cases in the late 1970s. Preparatory hearings stretched through spring. On Tuesday, the 23rd of May, Judge Edward Cowart set trial for Monday, the 25th of June in Miami-Dade County, relocating the proceedings to ensure an impartial jury. The court also ruled television cameras permissible, marking one of the first criminal trials in American history to allow gavel-to-gavel broadcast. Engineers installed extra lighting in the old Dade County Courthouse, and press credentials doubled in number overnight. Within the jail's stone walls, Bundy reviewed voir dire rules and drafted witness lists that included sorority members he intended to question personally. Guards noted his renewed confidence, yet outside, investigators finalized transport chains and reinforced cell doors for the coming move south. As summer humidity settled over Florida, 2 narratives prepared to collide: a state determined to present irrefutable forensic proof, and a defendant convinced that charm and legal jargon could still dismantle the case assembled against him. Television crews unloaded cables and light stands before dawn on Monday, the 25th of June of 1979, lining the marble steps of the Dade County Courthouse while humid air hovered over Biscayne Bay. Inside, jury selection for State of Florida versus Theodore Robert Bundy began under the steady gaze of Judge Edward Cowart. Viewers across the nation watched live as potential jurors filed past microphones, one of the earliest instances of gavel-to-gavel broadcast in criminal proceedings. Technical directors remarked that ratings rivaled primetime shows, underscoring the public's fixation on the polite law student accused of late-night campus violence. Opening statements commenced on Thursday, the 28th of June. Prosecutors laid out a sequence of forensic exhibits: plaster casts of a bite impression, fibers from a ski cap, paint flakes matching a vintage Volkswagen, and hair strands recovered from the seized orange Beetle. Each item was displayed beneath bright studio-grade lamps so television viewers could see minute details. The state framed its case around physical linkages rather than motive, emphasizing measurable science over speculation. Bundy, serving as co-counsel, adopted a different strategy. He cross-examined police technicians with questions drawn from law library manuals, challenging chain-of-custody forms and measurement tolerances. Observers noted his calm tone and occasional smile toward the gallery, gestures that contrasted sharply with photographs of dormitory rooms entered without consent during the early hours of January 15th. Commentators debated whether the defendant's visible confidence helped or harmed his cause. Mid-trial, forensic dentist Dr. Richard Souveron took the stand, presenting transparent overlays of Bundy's upper incisors aligned against the shoulder wound of victim Lisa Levy. Jurors leaned forward while camera zoom lenses captured the matching notches. Defense objections to methodology were overruled. A pathologist then described non-lethal injuries sustained by surviving residents, testimony that anchored abstract forensic numbers to human consequence without using graphic language. The defense called character witnesses, former professors, a hospital volunteer coordinator, and a Seattle crisis line supervisor. Each attested to Bundy's courteous demeanor and academic promise. Yet during cross-examination, prosecutors highlighted time gaps in travel records, suggesting an itinerary woven through missing person reports from Washington to Colorado. On Tuesday, the 24th of July, closing arguments ended just before nightfall. The jury retired to a secure room furnished with notebooks, photographs, and audio recordings. National anchors speculated through the evening, replaying courtroom highlights on looping clips. Deliberations lasted less than 7 hours. At 9:50 on Wednesday morning, the 25th of July, jurors returned unanimous findings of guilt for 2 counts of homicide and 3 counts of attempted homicide, along with burglary charges associated with unlawful entry into the Chi Omega house. The trial moved immediately into a penalty phase. Bundy, sensing dwindling options, placed companion Carol Boone on the witness list. While questioning her on Tuesday, the 7th of August, he invoked an obscure Florida statute declaring that a marriage becomes legal when announced in open court before a judge. The sudden proposal and acceptance, made amid legal formality, startled spectators and briefly shifted news copy from forensic evidence to personal spectacle. 2 days later, the same jury recommended the most severe sentence permitted. Judge Cowart, following the advisory vote, imposed twin penalties to be carried out at the state facility in Rayford. As cameras captured the ruling, the defendant maintained a measured expression, even offering polite thanks to courtroom staff when proceedings adjourned. Outside, reporters summarized a landmark trial that blended emerging forensic science, live media coverage, and the unsettling duality of a defendant who quoted case law while facing consequences forged by his own trail of violence. Daily routines inside Florida State Prison settled quickly after sentencing. Beginning on Monday, the 13th of August of 1979, Theodore Bundy occupied cell number 3 on the east wing of Rayford's Q Block, a unit reserved for individuals awaiting electric chair rulings. Guards noted that he organized his few belongings, legal pads, stationery, and a small transistor radio, into precise stacks, maintaining the orderly habits once admired in law school seminars. The first cascade of appeals arrived before autumn equinox. On Wednesday, the 19th of September, defense filings argued that televised coverage had biased jurors and that bite mark comparison lacked universally accepted standards. Florida's Supreme Court reviewed transcripts and 11 months later affirmed every count. During the wait, Bundy wrote letters to supporters who discovered his prison address through true crime magazines. Some offered sympathy, others sought souvenirs. Regulations limited him to 5 personal correspondents, yet he rotated names to extend his reach, treating each envelope as a miniature podium. Year-end holidays in 1980 brought unexpected news. Carol Boone, now legally his spouse, announced that she was expecting a child. Conjugal visits were prohibited, but brief moments in an attorney-client conference room, unmonitored by cameras, had allowed physical contact. Their daughter was born on Thursday, the 24th of October of 1982, at Shands Hospital in Gainesville. Photographs of the infant reaching through plexiglass toward a smiling Bundy circulated in national newspapers, fueling debate about parental rights for condemned prisoners. While family life unfolded in headlines, investigators from western states reopened cold files. Detectives from Washington, Idaho, and Utah sought closure for families whose relatives vanished years earlier near forests and ski resorts. They traveled to Rayford carrying aerial maps and property records, hoping Bundy might trade information for more time. Initially, he refused, insisting on total innocence outside Florida. That posture shifted in the spring of 1986 after the United States Supreme Court denied a key appeal. Facing a firm calendar date, he began to bargain. On Monday, the 11th of May of 1987, Bundy met with Seattle detective Robert Keppel for 6 straight hours. Without direct admission, he spoke in detached third-person phrases, describing how a hypothetical offender might scout parking lots, disable a vehicle, and return later with restraints hidden beneath a tire. He marked locations on topographic maps: Issaquah's Wooded Ravine, Oregon's Highway 20 corridor, Utah's American Fork Canyon. Search teams verified several points, recovering bone fragments and jewelry acknowledged by surviving relatives as personal effects of missing daughters. The partial confessions continued sporadically. By early 1988, Bundy estimated his victim count at double digits, refusing precise totals but conceding that the figure surpassed 30. These sessions, taped by law enforcement agencies, later informed academic studies on compulsive violent behavior. Psychiatrists noted his shift between clinical detail and vague remorse, interpreting the pattern as calculated rather than cathartic. Despite incremental cooperation, legal avenues narrowed. Federal courts rejected the final writ of habeas corpus on Friday, the 18th of November of 1988, stating that procedural complaints had been thoroughly addressed in prior reviews. Florida officials scheduled a new execution warrant for late January. Bundy's daily journal entries turned from legal strategy to reflective monologues about childhood, religion, and blame placed on external influences such as violent media. Yet he never produced concrete apologies for specific families. As the calendar turned to 1989, outside activism intensified on both sides. Candlelight vigils formed near the prison gate, while other groups waved handmade placards urging swift completion of the sentence. Radio talk shows debated ethics, forensic reliability, and the unprecedented media role that had followed the case since the pioneer broadcast from Miami almost a decade earlier. Inside Q Block, guards counted the remaining days on a clipboard taped beside the control booth, aware that one of the most scrutinized criminal cases in modern American history was approaching its final legal milestone. January settled over northern Florida with a damp chill that seeped through concrete walls. At 5 o'clock on the afternoon of Monday, the 23rd of January of 1989, Warden Tom Barton read aloud the official warrant, authorizing the sentence to be carried out at first light. Guards logged every movement in Q Block. Bundy declined the special last meal menu, requesting only the standard prison supper: steak, eggs, and toast. He consumed little. Instead, he spent the evening writing brief farewells to his mother in Tacoma and to his daughter, now 6 years old, whose photographs he kept tucked inside a paperback Bible. Outside the main gate, television trucks idled along State Road 16. Reporters erected folding tables for overnight broadcasts, their camera lights reflecting off mist that rose from the St. Johns River. Protesters gathered on both sides of the debate, some holding candles, others waving signs fashioned from neon poster board. Troopers established crowd control lines and rotated fresh officers every 4 hours to prevent altercations. Inside, a chaplain visited Bundy shortly after midnight, offering prayer and a chance for final confession. Bundy spoke quietly for 20 minutes, attributing his actions to an undefined force, yet accepting that the scheduled procedure would proceed. At 2:15, medical staff performed a routine physical, recording blood pressure and heart rate that hovered slightly above normal but stable. No sedatives were administered at his request. The final checklist began at 5 minutes past 6. Bundy changed into brown twill trousers and a light cotton shirt, both issued for the occasion, and walked unshackled the short distance from his cell to the execution chamber, flanked by 4 guards. Witnesses later reported that he maintained an even stride, eyes forward, shoulders squared. After he seated himself, leather straps secured wrists, ankles, and chest to the high-backed wooden chair, known colloquially among staff as Old Sparky. A moistened sponge and copper skull cap were placed beneath a black leather hood, completing the circuit assembly tested earlier by electricians. At 6:58, the curtain separating the chamber from the observation room drew open. Among the 32 witnesses stood detectives who had pursued the case since 1974, as well as family members of Linda Ann Healy, Kimberly Leach, and the Chi Omega victims. The warden asked for last words. In a steady voice, Bundy expressed love to family and offered a general statement, urging all present to seek understanding rather than hatred. No direct apology to victims was voiced. The switch was activated at 7 o'clock and 3 seconds. A surge of 2,000 volts coursed for 1 minute, followed by a lower current cycle. At 7:10, the attending physician checked vital signs and pronounced the sentence fulfilled. The curtains closed, and officials led witnesses out through a side corridor. News of completion flashed across national networks within minutes. Crowds outside responded in divergent ways. Some cheered and set off small firecrackers, others knelt in silent prayer. Prison staff transported the remains to a funeral home in Gainesville, where cremation occurred the same afternoon at the family's request. Bundy's ashes were later scattered in an undisclosed area of Washington's Cascade Range, terrain once searched in vain by countless volunteers. As night fell on the 24th, commentators shifted focus from the individual to the broader implications. Analysts discussed advancements sparked by the investigation, interstate data sharing, forensic dentistry protocols, and campus safety reforms. For many families, the formal conclusion offered a measure of closure, though the ache of absence persisted. The extensive record left behind, court transcripts, taped confessions, and investigative files, now became material for scholars, law enforcement trainees, and mental health researchers aiming to prevent similar crises. Public agencies began cataloging the legacy almost as soon as television lights dimmed outside Rayford. On Friday, the 3rd of February of 1989, 8 state attorneys from the Pacific Northwest convened by conference call, agreeing to pool investigative notes into a single archive held at the Washington State Patrol headquarters. Their aim was practical: convert scattered paper files into a searchable computer index so that future detectives, facing similar patterns, could cross-check names, vehicles, and crime scene details within minutes rather than months. The project, called VCAP, Violent Criminal Apprehension Program, expanded nationwide by autumn of 1990. Federal funding supplied desktop terminals to more than 200 sheriff's offices, linking regions once separated by slow mail and busy fax lines. Analysts later credited the system with matching tire tracks from an Oregon riverbank to a license plate in Nevada, preventing another series of disappearances. Training manuals cited the Bundy timeline as a textbook example of why interstate data flow saves time and lives. Colleges, too, absorbed lessons. The University of Washington installed blue light emergency phones across campus on Wednesday, the 21st of March of 1991. Student guides began offering evening escort services that semester, walking classmates between libraries, dorms, and parking garages. Similar programs appeared at Florida State University and Utah State University within 2 years. By the late 1990s, pepper spray keychains and self-defense seminars had become common graduation gifts, reflecting a cultural shift toward proactive personal safety. Forensic science advanced in parallel. Although bite mark comparison had played a pivotal role in the Miami trial, skepticism grew after DNA testing exonerated suspects in unrelated cases. In June of 2003, the American Board of Forensic Odontology tightened accreditation rules, citing the need for quantifiable standards. Laboratories that once relied on photo overlays now supplemented analysis with three-dimensional scans and statistics on dental uniqueness. Media practices also evolved. Networks reviewing their 1979 footage recognized that continuous courtroom broadcasting, while informative, risked sensationalizing tragedy. In September of 2005, the Radio Television Digital News Association issued guidelines advising reporters to minimize close-ups of grieving families and to provide context on victim impact programs. Journalism schools adopted these standards, using archived Bundy coverage as a cautionary case study during ethics modules. Survivors and relatives transformed grief into advocacy. Kathy Kleiner, injured in the Chi Omega attack, spoke at the National Crime Victims' Rights Week ceremony on Monday, the 11th of April of 1994, encouraging audiences to trust intuition and report unsettling encounters promptly. Her testimony influenced state grants for crisis hotlines, which grew from 400 centers in 1990 to more than 1,500 by 2010. Psychology researchers mined Bundy's prison interviews for insight into charm-based manipulation. Findings published in the Journal of Interpersonal Violence on the 2nd of July of 2008 described a confidence predator profile, individuals who exploit social norms of politeness to gain proximity. Law enforcement academies incorporated these findings into interview and interrogation courses, teaching recruits how to detect performative empathy. By the 20th anniversary of the execution, Thursday, the 24th of January of 2009, most direct participants had retired, yet their institutional changes endured. Linked databases, campus lighting, rigorous evidence labs, and balanced media protocols. The Cascade foothills where search parties once trudged in silence now carry discrete markers honoring missing students, reminders that routine safeguards are often written in the wake of extraordinary harm. The files remain open to scholars inside climate-controlled vaults, a permanent ledger showing how collective vigilance, steady investigation, and incremental reforms can emerge from the darkest chapters of ordinary history.